Hey, Carlos, how are you doing?
What's up, Trevor? It's so good to see you and to talk to you today.
Exactly. It's fantastic to talk to you. Fantastic composer. Um, hey, I'd like to know about the piece that the Harlem Chamber Players is going to perform, how did it come about, your thoughts on it. Maybe you can share that with us.
Yeah, so my piece, Elegy, Cry from the Grave, was written in 2014.
Mhm.
And was inspired by the murder of Trayvon Martin at that time. Michael Brown, and then there's Freddie Gray. And as a black man, I was just, in this country, I was just really frustrated. I was angry.
Mm.
Um, I was afraid, for my life. And I wrote the piece as an outlet, for me, just to kind of get a feel of like, just to kind of give, music a way to kind of express my emotions and what I was feeling. And this is what came out, Elegy. And I wanted to pay homage to them. And here we are, 2021, and that list has grown exponentially, and um, I'm sad to say the feelings still are there, and that we are still adding to that list of Black people being murdered. And so that's I think the piece is still relevant, and yeah, that's where we are.
I think sometime soon after Trayvon Martin was killed, I was in Paris, just, and I was getting coffee at a Starbucks, and they always ask your name, and he couldn't understand my accent, but he wrote Trayvon on the cup. Now, that's
Mm,
powerful
wow.
because he didn't hear my name, but he probably knew that I was American, African American, and what happened to Trayvon, resonated, and he was of African descent and living in Paris. So I'm wondering, as you said, things are still going on. That was way before what happened this summer with Breonna Taylor, with George Floyd. So when you approach writing that piece and you want to get the feelings out, like what was your, in approaching like, all right, I want to put something down musically. What was the first thing that you thought you could express through the music? And it's called an elegy, so I'm just wondering if there's something specific.
Yeah, well, whenever I write a piece, I sit down at the piano and I improvise, and I don't limit myself as to what comes out. I just sort of let it flow. And I know you're an improviser, you're a pianist, and we have that in common. And it's one of these things where you're just releasing, not thinking about
Hmm.
what particular chords or what
Hmm.
particular scales you're using. It's none of that. It's just in a way being a conduit, and
Hmm.
kind of flowing with things. And
Hmm.
um, I just sort of let it flow. And I approach a lot of my pieces the same way. And then there's a refinement. The instrumentation is for string quartet,
Hmm.
and it's you think of that as a very intimate
Hmm.
ensemble. Of course, we think of the Haydn string quartets
Hmm.
and Beethoven and Mozart. These are composers that use this instrumentation in a very intimate way, and I thought it would be a great a way to kind of express these feelings. Um, because it's a very intimate ensemble, and I just felt the sort of transferring what I did to piano to string quartet.
Hmm.
And yeah, do you work the same way?
Yeah, I think definitely. I go to the piano and sometimes I do what I call noodling.
Hmm.
And people are like, what's that? Like, I don't know. I just need to kind of have my fingers move
Hmm.
and not think about what I'm doing, and just because sometimes I need the immediate response of kind of creating something. And sometimes out of that, I'll play something like, oh, wait, that has potential. And then I go to the paper and then I start saying, okay, what is this chord? What does this mean? And that's probably how my piece, Fudo Mio, started. I was asked to write a piece for a concert for the Amornay String Quartet. I think this was back in like 2000. I should know the year, but I think it was 2012. And their concert was a concert of music by composers who either died in a concentration camp or who fled Europe because of the Nazis. And they said, well, why don't you write something that addresses some issue of social justice? So I decided to think about a memory of my love of going to the Boston Museum of Fine Arts when I went to Tufts University, studied with T.J. Anderson, who you know. And I took a course in Japanese painting, and we had an assignment to go to the museum and find Japanese work of art and talk about it. And I discovered this statue of Fudo Myo, who is a Buddhist character, I think a bodhisattva, but don't quote me, but his job is to fight ignorance. And the image is of this really strong figure with a sword in one hand, a rope to tie up people who are basically mean, evil, and behind him are these flames. And I went there ever so often, dragged my roommate, because I felt like I had to get in touch with this idea that in order to fight inequality, you really have to do something. Mm-hmm. It's an act. It's not saying that's bad, that shouldn't happen. Like, well, what are you going to do? Right. You need to kind of do something. So in writing this piece, I wrote a piece that starts with kind of fiery chords. And the whole idea is to subdue the ignorant, the ungodly into something that's manageable. So that's what the whole piece is about. This idea that you can't just, thinking about like January 6th, you can't just say, well, just let it happen. You have to do something to bring those things under control. And so, yeah, I probably started the piece just kind of playing with certain things and came up with what I thought was a fiery chord. Mm-hmm. And then, as you know, I see you nodding like, okay, that's my thing. And then I just started from there, and that triggered ideas. Well, how do I bring something, how do I subdue these chords or these rhythms? And that was really how I got through the piece.
Wow. So you speak about inequality and using music as a means of a platform to address this. And, you know, Black people in this country have been dealing with inequality, you know, forever. Yes. And composers, you know, as composers, we sort of deal with it in our music, right? And in different ways, you know, we hear it, you know, and we can hear blues and pentatonic scale and all these things. So my question to you is can we hear, you know, these elements of struggle that have been associated with Black music and like blues and, you know, these types of things in your music? If an audience member didn't know you were African American, would they know that, oh, this is a Black composer based on the type of music that you write?
That's a great question, because I think it's in everything that I've written since probably 1996. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that has to do with, I studied with Ollie Wilson, who looked at the connection between West African music and African American music, and also through studying that connection and what he called conceptual approaches, like how people, Black folk, perform music and what has to be in the music. But I also realized that in America, there's a lingua franca of the blues. It's so much a part of all popular music. It's part of all aspects of African American music that just having that minor da da da, that communicates something. So that even if someone is unaware that that comes from Black folk, it has a meaning and kind of represents what I think that represents, which is kind of a weird way of saying it, that in a major context that you might, which is like, that's the pain, that's the like, you know, that's the struggle. And also I feel that it's connected to things like the spiritual, it's connected to the resistance. Like, okay, this is your major scale, but this is our note. That comes from what we left over there. That's our way of doing it. And I think that's also important, that idea that there has to be some element of, you know, what we were taken from and what we've experienced. So those are the ways I kind of look at it.
Yeah.
So I think, there's some pieces people say, it sounds familiar, and like, okay, maybe you don't hear it specifically, but there's something in there that, you know, might be a flatted third or flatted 5, some note that's connected to the blues, or even just sliding between notes, which is so much a part of, kind of the vocal tradition. How about yourself? Like how do you approach that? And
Yeah, it really depends. Sometimes I'd like to consciously, use these idioms. Other times it
Mhm.
kind of creeps in subconsciously.
It creeps in. Yeah.
Yeah, just because it's so much a part of who I am, and um, sometimes I hear it. Sometimes other audience members, they come up to me and say, "Oh, this just sounds very gospel," or it sounds like Muddy Waters, or these types of things. But I think going back to the improvisation, that stage for me, it's so important to kind of release these expectations, and whatever comes, if it's a blues scale, fine. If it's,
That's right.
a pentatonic, fine. It's a part of that releasing. And so sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, I think that's great because once you get into a place where you're saying, I'm going to write something that sounds,
Mhm.
then the piece is in a bad place
Yeah.
because you're not listening to the notes, you're not listening to what you're trying to do. You're trying to kind of formate something that maybe isn't there, or you're not listening to the music. And then, people will hear things that aren't really there, but they have the freedom to hear that. And I'm sure you've had that too. Or think, oh, I heard this, and you think, well, I don't know if that's there, but
Yeah.
if that meant something to you, that's my job.
Yeah.
That's the whole job. If it meant something, if you were moved, because I like music that moves me, your music moves me. I like music that I feel that after I've listened to it, I'm a changed person. Like I enjoyed something, I enjoyed my time, and that's really all I think we can do.
Yeah, and that's the joy of being a composer, just kind of releasing it into the world, and people, the audience members or consumers, they get what they need to get out of it, and it may not be what you expect, and that's the joy. I love that, as a composer, to kind of release it, and then it's something that you would never expect in a million years.
That's great. Well, it's been fun talking to you,
Yes, sir.
and looking forward to hearing your music again. And be safe. be, be
Be
safe and
healthy.
be well. All right. All right. Talk to you soon.
Yes, sir.
All right.